Welcome to another reading from the Library of Historical Apologetics. Today we'll be reading a selection from the work of Johannes Ebrard. Ebrard was a German theologian who was born in 1818 and died in 1888, and he was a staunch defender of the historicity of the Gospels. This passage comes from a work which has been translated as The Gospel History, a compendium of critical investigations in support of the historical character of the four Gospels, translated and published by T&T Clark in 1863. Ebrard writes with one eye on a historical event in which he was involved in some measure, and that is the so-called Zurich Putsch of the year 1839. In September of 1839, there was an uprising of the conservative cantons in Switzerland by way of the reaction to the attempt by the liberal elites in Zurich to put David Friedrich Strauss, the well-known skeptical New Testament scholar, into a position as a professor of theology in Zurich. The move was wildly unpopular, and the people in the surrounding more conservative areas rose in armed revolt and marched on Zurich. The events that Ebrard will be referring to have to do with some of the tense things that happened during those days and some of the fog of what was going on and the crisscrossed signals and so forth. But he begins this story of the Swiss messenger by talking about some obvious facts about historical testimony, and of course he has one eye on the Gospels as he's doing it. We commence, he says, by laying down these two general principles. Number one, it is very possible, when several writers narrate the same occurrence, that they may differ in several points from one another. In fact, it is most probable that they will do so. Number two, it is quite possible for two different occurrences, happening within the same sphere and amidst the same circumstances, to resemble each other in several particulars. On these two principles, but little need be said. The former is confirmed in 100 ways every day. We have only for an experiment to obtain the report of a sermon from two different persons, both qualified to give it. The arrangement, the leading thoughts, and the most striking passages will perhaps be given word for word by both, but the filling up will certainly differ widely in the two reports. Or take some such accident as that a man has broken his leg or been run over by a carriage. Apart from all exaggerations with which accounts of such things are so frequently accompanied, just listen to two of the coolest and most intelligent bystanders and see whether one will not give prominence to this point and the other to that, one laying emphasis on what the other passes over altogether without there being anything false in either of the reports. This is perfectly natural. Each one, besides what is necessary to explain the course of the event, states what struck him most, what is most deeply impressed on his memory, and what comes readiest through the association of ideas. And thus divergences arise. And the only question in reference to these is, can they be explained by the free mode in which the narrators have treated the subject? It is equally natural, on the other hand, that such accounts should contain apparent discrepancies. I notice some very interesting proofs of this in the oral communications which I received at one time in Zurich with reference to the well-known affair of September 1839, and that in cases where the eyewitnesses were intelligent and trustworthy men. I may be allowed to cite one of the instances. The report that troops had been sent for to Bern to overawe the people, and that they might arrive at any moment, had produced the greatest excitement. The people, armed on every hand, and were ready at the shortest notice to march to Zurich or meet the Bernese forces. On the evening of the 5th of September, information was received by the leaders of the popular movement that there was no foundation for the report. They immediately caused several hundred letters to be written and dispatched in all directions for the purpose of quieting the people. Now, one person informed me that, late in the evening, N was sent with a letter to Pfäffikon. Another told me that N was sent in the evening to Pfäffikon, but after going a short distance returned with a report that the alarm bell had already been rung in Pfäffikon. A third related that two messengers had been sent on horseback to Pfäffikon, and a fourth that N had sent two men on horseback to Pfäffikon. If any four accounts ever seemed irreconcilable, these did. And if a harmonist had attempted to reconcile the whole on the supposition that N was sent but met two messengers from Thethicon who reported the outbreak of the riot, that he turned back with them to Zurich, where he immediately procured horses and sent them back in all speed to quiet the people, it would be rejected as a most improbable and artificial conjecture. Yet this was the simple explanation which I received from N himself when I asked him what the facts of the case really were. We see from this example that there is much greater fear of being too timid than too bold in resorting to hypotheses for the solution of apparent discrepancies. This has been a reading from the Library of Historical Apologetics. I'm Tim McGrew.